Okay, so let's talk about UBI, Universal Basic Income, and why it's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work really has to do with the liberal mind, and not just the liberal mind, I would say the American mind, which is very concerned with how especially children exist. It's very concerned with edge cases and with exceptions. So if you imagine universal basic income, which this idea is actually not that new. I know Andrew Yang is very associated with it, and he ran a campaign that like just everybody's going to get an income every month. And then what you do with it is basically up to you, but everybody will get that income. This idea is actually not that new. It's even been floated by conservative and libertarian economists. Milton Friedman floated this as a negative income tax. So the problem with a lot of subsidies that we have is they go away as people make more money. So there becomes a point where you make enough money that you don't qualify for all of the subsidies, you don't qualify for all the benefits, but you don't make enough money that the amount of money that you make offsets the value of those. So the point of a negative income tax is that it softens that. It softens that so that you can keep making money and the subsidy just kind of slowly goes away until you don't need it anymore. That was the idea behind negative income tax. UBI would be that, but we just don't even check because it doesn't matter. Everybody gets $3,000 a month. And if you're making $100,000 a month, you get $3,000 a month. And if you're making $5 a month, you get an extra $3,000 a month. And obviously for the poor person, it makes a huge difference. And for the massively wealthy person, it makes no difference, but whatever. It's completely fair. Now, the attraction to that is that you are going to replace our social welfare system with UBI. And for people who are intelligent, middle class, and above thinkers, this makes a lot of sense. It's like I could live, like I'm imagining, I'll just use myself as this model, theory of mind, right? If I can imagine sort of my poorest experience was making like $1,000 a month. So if I had $3,000 a month, and I was in that situation, it would have been like amazing. I would have had such a better lifestyle, but I was still able to live fine on $1,000 a month. So that extra $3,000 a month would have funded a lot of upward mobility for me and ability to like do better with my businesses and to live, certainly live more riotously. It would have made a big difference. Now, $3,000 a month would still make a big difference, but it wouldn't be nearly as big an impact as when I was at my poorest. And I think about if I was poor, how would I have spent all of the money? The problem is low rent people. And that's what's going to happen with UBI is that if you give everybody $2,000 a month, whatever you decide it's going to be, they're not going to spend it on the vital things of life that you imagine you would spend it on. They're going to, if you give them a $2,000 check, they're going to spend it on all kinds of things that you wouldn't approve of. All kinds of things that you wouldn't do if you were in their place. We're going back to that empathy thing. You have to know how they feel, not how you would feel if you were them. That's emotional projection. So they would spend it on Carnival cruises, and they would spend it on new sneakers and clothes, and they would spend it on food and booze and whatever other things that would piss the money away into the gutter, and they would be just as poor as before. And the smart people among them would make great use of that money, which is true, but a lot of people wouldn't. Not all of them, but a lot of them wouldn't. And you'd have this problem, and we have this problem now, which is that the people on food stamps don't feed their children. The people on food stamps don't feed their children. This is going to sound bizarre to you, but it's true. That's why we have free or reduced school lunch programs. This is a thing. This was a thing I taught at a Title I school. This was a big thing. Almost every kid had free lunch. And then some schools they don't even test for income anymore. It's just everybody gets a free lunch. It's little mini UBI. I wondered about this. Like, why are all these kids getting free or reduced lunch? Can't their parents buy them lunch? It's not that expensive. Can't they like pack a lunch for them? The parents won't do it. The parents won't pack a lunch for them. The parents are too checked out. They won't do anything for their kids. They won't even feed their kids with the food stamps that they get. This was a thing too. It's like, so the parents who get the food stamps, and I remember back in the day, I found out like these families were getting like $800 a month in food stamps, which is like quadruple my eating budget or quadruple like my family's budget for food. It's definitely, let me think. No, it's probably double. It's probably double my family's budget and like quadruple the money that I would ever have spent on food. Even, I used to spend like $100 a month on food when I was really poor, which is like now would be maybe $200 a month. But anyway, the point is, they don't feed their kids. So we have to feed the kids. You cannot tolerate kids being hungry. And as Americans, it's offensive to us that kids would go hungry because their parents are bad. So we make them go to school. We will feed them at school. And now a lot of schools do free breakfast, free lunch, free dinner. You get 3 free meals. They'll feed you a meal at 7 a.m. when the buses will come early so that the kids can eat breakfast from 7:30 to 8. They'll have a free like a free treat or whatever for like a morning break. They'll have a brunch, free lunch, and then they'll have an afternoon meal. They'll have a free dinner like at 3:30 or 4 or something. So there's schools that give 3 free meals, 3 square meals a day to kids because their parents on food stamps won't feed them. So not all of them, a small percentage. But we can't tolerate that. If there's that one kid at school who doesn't eat, that's an intolerable situation for us. And I know teachers, because I was one, right? If there was one kid coming to school and he was sitting by himself and not eating, that teacher would buy him lunch. The teachers would take the money out of their own paycheck and they would buy that student lunch. Now, that's actually way more efficient than what free or reduced school lunch would do. If you took away free or reduced school lunch programs and every kid had to pay for his own food or bring his own food, they would, and there'd be like 1 or 2 kids and the teachers would buy him food. And that would be so much cheaper and more efficient than what we do, which is in order to avoid this edge case problem of one kid in the corner who's not being fed by his irresponsible parents, we then create a giant expensive socialist system that serves everybody and probably does it poorly. It's not like, I don't know if you grew up with this experience that like the school lunch was garbage. You know, Captain Underpants would make fun of it. I'm like, I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. You know, the school lunch is garbage and we have to, so we're paying a whole lot of money. Schools are a point of sale for welfare. I've talked about this before. One of the point, public school is a joint product. It doesn't just produce education; it produces all kinds of welfare products. And one of them is food, free or reduced school lunch for kids. So, we spend a lot of money to feed the kids, probably food that's not as nutritious as we would actually eat ourselves. But you can't tolerate that starving kid. It's the same thing. Here's a human interest story. Here's this family who can't eat. Americans can't tolerate that. If your neighbor came to you and was like, "I'm hungry," you would make him a sandwich, right? I certainly would. That's the American way of thinking. We're very charitable. We're very caring for our neighbors, that sort of thing. But with UBI, you'd have that same problem, which is that why should you can't have UBI without a big tolerance for some people are just not going to act optimally. They're not even going to act suboptimally. They're going to be bad. They're going to be the low rent people. And you have to figure out whether you can tolerate people doing that and to what degree you're going to tolerate that if you want to have something like UBI. So what you'd actually have with UBI is you'd have universal basic income plus all the other social welfare programs we have. Because the fact is there's no amount of UBI that you can give to certain people that will alleviate their behaviors. They will still act in the same way. You could give them a UBI of $10,000 a month. You'd find that they bought a car and their kids were hungry. You give them $10,000 a month. You find that the parents overdosed on a drug and cost the medical system a huge amount of money in addition to that, right? Or they couldn't pay the medical bill. Maybe we got rid of socialized medicine or something. And then all of a sudden you have to figure out how to provide for that edge case, right? We can't let kids go hungry or go naked or anything like that. So it's just not tolerable to the American mindset. We're too charitable. We're too caring for other people. So what you'd end up with is UBI plus all the social programs we have. It would just be an extra expense. You couldn't replace all of our mini social welfare programs with UBI. We're too paternalistic. That's the other thing too, is once you have your finger in somebody else's pie, once you are giving them something, giving them money, you start to want to dictate how they're using it because you're giving it to them for a purpose. If the purpose is to alleviate poverty, then they need to be spending it on ways that address the poverty. That's why we have food stamps. Food stamps exist as an alternative to direct payments because it turns out when you make direct payments to people, some people will spend it on food and clothes. Other people will spend it on booze and let their kids go hungry and naked. So you create food stamp that's like, you can't buy booze with this. You can only buy food so your kids won't be hungry. Then they still don't feed their kids. So you give them free lunch at school. And meanwhile, all the people on food stamps are obese. That's a whole nother one. I've done another video about that before, that the poorest among us are actually the most obese because food is so cheap and so plentiful. And we give so much money to people for them to buy cheap, plentiful, high calorie food, delicious food. And it's not a moral failing. I don't think people are morally bad for giving in to temptation and eating a lot of really good tasting food. There's far worse moral flaws than eating too much good tasting food, in my opinion. But that's what I think about that. You guys, of course, can tell me what you think about that down below in the comments. Have a good one.